Yesterday I went for a walk in San Pedro. I was going to meet up with a friend, a disciple. But when I got there, I sat down at a table with my Bible and overlooked the bluff and the sea below. There were a few people that early in the morning meandering around the top of the trails of the cliffs, and occasionally the usual homeless individual scavenging through the trash cans. I looked and thought to myself, do I have any cash to give him? Should I walk over or call him over? I didn't have any food to give him. I thought about it for a moment, and it seemed to be that it wasn't meant to be. I continued doing what I was doing, having a conversation on the phone as well. I didn't think too much about it. But as the moments progressed, I was able to have a conversation with one of the workers there at the gate for the parking and talk to her about her name. And my friend over the phone was able to look it up and tell her name means trust and believe, and she did not know that. Imoni was her name. Trust and believe. And she was very pleased to know that because she hadn't known the meaning of her name. I sat down and got up and stretched a bit and walked as I continued to wait for the arrival of the friend. And then there was a couple walking. I briefly said hello. And by this time, the young lady at the gate had taken a break to eat a sandwich, and I continued to have a little bit more conversation with her. After a few minutes had passed, the couple that had passed was turning back around, passing me again. And I noticed something about them, and I made a comment. And the gentleman said, wow, she just told me the very same thing that you just said to me. And of course the conversation ensued with them wondering, how did I know? And I talked to them about some life things that they were both dealing with, actually. The Lord had revealed something to me. They were very grateful, both of them. Extremely grateful for the conversation. And they appreciated the words and said they would take them to heart. And it meant a lot to them. And I was glad to have that conversation with them. And when I went to walk back to my table, the homeless young man was sitting at it. And he looked up at me and he said to me, what's the word of the Lord today? And I said, wow, you want the word of the Lord? Yes. I saw you talking to those people. And he smiled and he was sitting down. He was eating a sandwich. Interesting. And I sat down. I said, well, let me tell you what I was reading. And it was in Nehemiah chapter 9. And as he looked at me with light in his eyes and so honest to want to know what I had read, he then said, oh, would you like a sandwich? And he immediately went in his bag, didn't wait for me to answer it, and pulled out a sandwich and handed it to me. And then went in his bag again and pulled out a couple of bags of chips, giving to me what I had wanted to give to him when I briefly saw him. Now, not only was he giving me bread, but he wanted the bread that I was reading and asked me, what is the word of the Lord? And he sat with me and listened, and he had all of the right responses and had insights himself. It was wonderful, joyful. Along the time of this conversation, going through Nehemiah, then going through 2 Chronicles 7, then the friend showed up, a disciple. And of course, again, he greeted him. And we sat. I continued to talk with the young man. He asked some questions. I gave some answers. He gave some insights, and I thanked him for his answers. And we stood up. I said, let's walk. So we went to go walk below the bluffs, along the rocks. And there, as we walked and talked, I wanted to know more about his life and his situation. And he began to share with me how he ended up here from Northern California, had lived in Vegas with his mother and father. They divorced, and now he's here. And he's searching, and he's not certain. So we walked around the rocks, and I let him tell me about his life, and I gave him some words of advice. And tears began to stream down his eyes. Of the words I gave him. Then we continued to walk. I thought I'd break up the monotony. He said, I used to box. I said, oh, wow, boxers come to this beach and they train with rocks. I said, oh, what do they do? I said, well, you pick up a rock, you throw it, you catch it, you lift the boulders. And he wanted to try it, so I said, well, come on this side of the cliff, I'll show you. We went, and he lifted rocks. And he loved it. Never known about lifting rocks and boulders. Sat down. And by this time, the disciple had, as I said, had come back to where we were at. He left the table because he had his guitar with him. I said, well, bring it down later. I don't want to be lugging a guitar around while I'm ministering. I said, well, now, why don't you go back up the hill? And he did. He's strong and able to do that. So he went back up the hill, came back down the hill with the guitar, and we began to sing, played one of my songs that he could play on the guitar, The Lord is my shepherd, Psalm 23. I shall not want. And we sang, and then sang another one about the peace of Jerusalem, and talked and shared and sung and just sang under the canopy of God's sky with the backdrop of the ocean and the rocks beneath our feet. Fresh air. And then by that time, 2 Ukrainian men showed up, and they were videotaping. And then they stayed to listen to the song. When we were done, they were so grateful and thankful. They said, thank you for your music, your song. And one of the men, he goes, I was depressed, particularly about my country. I'm here, and my family's there. But God sent me this friend. He helps to bring me joy and levity and laughter in the midst of my sadness. It was a wonderful conversation. Shared what he does for a living with essential oils and wood. And he gave great advice about some things that he does and how he does it. Prayed with him. The one I asked, would you like to be delivered? Because he was addicted to cigarettes. He said, yes, pray for me. And I did. prayer of healing for him to be delivered. Wonderful time. It was a good time. My friend had bought some salmon and yams and string beans to eat for the both of us. We sat and ate. The young man that was homeless went back up to the top of the hill. When I told him to wait for me at the top of the hill, I'll come and help you with some advice and help you in the city. I know people here. See what I can do. What more can I do for you? I want to do more for you to help you. When I got to the top of the hill, he was gone. Could not find him. And I don't know the details of his mental situation. Don't know if there's any effects of drugs that he may have been on since he's been on the street. Don't know all of that. Don't know if he simply had a change of mind. He did say that he has a hard time focusing. So give him grace to figure something slipped in his mind. He had a change of mind. Or he couldn't hold on to the thought. He had been walking homeless for 6 months. I looked for him, and I spent the next hour and a half driving around looking for him. I asked my friend to help me look for him, and he went a different direction. We could not find him. I went back down to the bluffs, and I asked the gatekeeper to take down my number. She remembered him and remembered me speaking to him. She said, if I see him, I'll call you and let you know. I'll tell him you're looking for him and how to meet up. He was looking for a place to work, and he was looking for a place to sleep, and I didn't know exactly how all of that would happen, but I had to be a part of it some way to help him. Rather is raise funds to get him into a hotel, or give him a blanket for the night, or even invite him back to sleep here. And then get him back to where he needed to go, to the homeless aid center that assists people. He couldn't go until Tuesday. So I figured, well, maybe I can take care of him till Tuesday. And I looked for him and couldn't find him. So I came home, and I showered, meditated, rested, and figured I'd try back in the morning. But then something said, go back. After I'd driven home, drive back. It's getting late. It's getting cold. Try again. So I drove all the way back up to San Pedro. In the last 40 minutes of the sun to try to find him before it got completely dark. I drove around again. I went down to this one other spot now that the crowd had dispersed from the holiday weekend. Maybe I could find him now. And then I walked. I was about to leave to go to another spot, and there was a gentleman sitting at the table writing in a notepad. And I was going to ask, had you seen him? I didn't ask him. I passed and kept walking. And when I passed him, I got about 15 to 20 feet past him where he was sitting. He yelled for me. I turned my head, he looked at me, and he yelled for me, asking me what's up, wanted to say hello. And I thought that was very odd, being that I had come from behind him, and he was buried in the notepad on the bench with his back to me. Could not have even noticed me until well after I had passed the table, and only if he had glanced up to see. And the Lord said, turn your head. I turned my head, and his head looked up, and he goes, what's up? And the Lord said, go talk to him. He's writing something holy. And I said to him, are you reading the Bible? He goes, I'm writing a letter. God is helping me write a letter meditating on someone that I need to write to, and he invoked the name of the Lord. I didn't have a Bible in front of him, by the way, when I asked him that. And he says, wow, this is a providence. You were meant to talk to me. I'm like, well, I was thinking, I don't want to get enthralled in a conversation. I've got very little sunlight left, and I need to find and continue to try to find a young man that needs a place. He's homeless on the street, and I have to look for him. And if I can't find him, I have to come back. And I showed him a picture. I said, have you seen this homeless person? He says, he looks familiar. I see all the... I said, well, he's only been here 2 days. He's been homeless in another city, another state, part of the state. But he's only been down here for 2 days. He doesn't know what to do and where to go. And so I had the conversation. We talked, and I asked him, what are you writing? And then I said, listen, I want to keep talking to you. And he wanted to keep talking to me. I said, but I've got to continue to look. I said, 2 pairs of eyes is better than 1. Would you help me look for him? And he got up. He says, I'll go with you. He got up, and he was ready to help me look for him. I says, well, come with me. And he did. And we went back to the cliffs. He drove with me. Went back to the cliffs. We went to look for him. Couldn't find him. I told him to look for his picture again. I went to this one spot, and I was ready to stop and go to another spot. And there was 3 young men over the cliffs fooling around as if they were going to throw one of them over the cliff, taking a silly picture. And a little laughter ensued with watching those 3 young men. And by the time that conversation began, it was over an hour later had passed. And they had questions. They wanted to ask me questions about life, about love and relationships and God. What about judgment? What about faith? How do I know? What is love? Can you tell me? Because I really want to know. What is it? What is this? How do we look for it? How do we know? Does God want us to be married? I said, well, for the most part, yes. You were created to procreate. That is your greatest and highest purpose in life. Yes. He says, I have questions. Can I ask you something? I says, you can. Don't know if I can answer it. But why don't you ask it? We'll see what the Lord says. And they stayed on that hill talking to me for over an hour. And what the young man I had met was writing in a notepad was a letter to a woman that he wants to marry who had been abused and beaten in a previous relationship and is in a state of trauma. She's scared. And he understood that. And God was teaching him how to wait. And now these young men are talking to me. They were 22, 23. And this man writing the letter is 29. And yet their questions about their life and their relationships that they wanted to know how would God counsel them directly was answering many of the questions that this young man was writing in a notepad. And he could see the providence of God in this moment, and it was blowing his mind, if you don't mind that expression. And he was just out of himself for, wow, only God could have planned this like this. I had one copy of my book, Always a Groomsman and Never the Groom, and I gave it to him. I gave him my number, and I gave all the 3 young men my number. They all had it. They were all friends. So if they have any questions, they could text me, and I could give them whatever God would give me to tell them, or nothing at all. Drove all the way back down to the park where now I had met the 29-year-old. And he was looking forward to our next meeting. I gave him some more words, and I gave him a few songs to listen to. He understood. He knew the Lord. Before we left, it's dark now. So the San Pedro cops are riding around the park. It's Memorial Day weekend, and they're on high alert, and they start putting the spotlight on it. My friend got a little upset about that, and he let the cops know it. I said, oh, let's not stir them up. Just be calm. San Pedro, you're used to the cops rolling up on you and just putting a spotlight. Yeah, you've got some elements in San Pedro that are necessary for the cops to do that. That's just the nature of the beast. The cops had wisdom enough to see, even though my friend was getting a little agitated at them. But they looked at me, and they could see who I was, and they have great discernment. And they scurried away. It was quite funny. He thought they were scurrying away because of him yelling at them, and he didn't realize they were scurrying away because of me. They were men of God, and they could see who I was. Oh, something's going on here. Let's keep going. They took the spotlight off and skedaddled out of there. The Lord has a sense of humor. It's late, and now I have to drive back home again. But I made the second effort, because that's what we do. Go the second mile. How far will you go? How much would you extend yourself for the good and benefit for another? Depends on how deep your love goes. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man would lay down his life for a friend. And in my case, and this was just a stranger. Hallelujah.